Lovely. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today's Attorney Collab by Visas.AI. Today's September 15th, and I'll hand it over to Jay to start us off today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this collab. And we would like to begin this collab with John. He will be giving us the go ahead for today's agenda. And we'll start with John, please.
Yeah, you're a little quiet, Jay. I don't know what's happening on the recording, but everybody sounds quieter than usual. I don't know how I sound, but anyway, thank you so much. The agenda today, we wanted to talk about a couple of different things, kind of what's going on in immigration. But Pierre, did we want to show a little bit about the technology today as well? We could save that for a later part. Why don't we go through and just see what the different lawyers are working on this week? I always love that part. One of the things that I'm working on, we received our first double registration RFE and in H-1Bs. And if you guys aren't familiar with that, bunch of fear out there by spread by USCIS that they're going to prosecute companies if they double register. The way they're threatening to prosecute them is making findings of fraud against companies that colluded to commit fraud against the United States government by filing more than one H-1B petition, even if alongside another company, right? And what we saw was a massive downturn in the number of H-1Bs, which was really interesting because we saw the highest ever registrations of H-1Bs, right? So we had 700,000 plus people registering for 85,000 visas, which is only 14% got picked. And then we saw the lowest number of people ever applied for those H-1Bs. They opened up another 77,000 out of 85,000 in the second wave, right? So really interesting what happened. We decided as a firm to say, let's inform people, let's educate people on what the law says. And so we went around at the end of the period to file to different committees and different groups, different associations to talk about here's what the law really says, because there was so much misinformation that was going out there, and not all that misinformation was coming from USCIS. A lot of it was coming from lawyers, right, telling their clients don't file these things. And what was misinformation was what is a double filing and who can do it and who can't do it, right? And so what I mean by that is that if an individual registers with multiple companies, right, the beneficiary, that's completely permissible. But some companies were misunderstanding that and say, well, we're not going to file an H-1B because you registered with another company, even if they didn't know that company. And so what was really sad about that is that only 14% get picked up. And then of those 14%, many of them didn't even file their H's, right? And some of that was the company saying we're not going to do it. And some of it was the beneficiaries got scared, right? So that happened. So what happened recently? So two things happened to us the last maybe week or two. One was one company that we didn't represent previously had a double registration, and they withdrew their case. Right now, here's an interesting tactic for lawyers: never withdraw after an RFE. That's a rule of thumb that we use. Never withdraw. Always answer them, especially if they're saying, "Are you committing fraud?" Because if they say, "We think you're committing fraud," and you just go, "I'm going to withdraw the case," and we've seen this many times, by the way, then immigration just thinks that you did it, right? And they send investigators and stuff like that. So this particular company that had double registration allegations against them from last year's cap said, we withdraw. So USCIS says, okay, we're denying your case, we withdrew it, and we're making a finding of fraud against you and the beneficiary. So this new beneficiary, if they try to get another H-1B and they didn't do anything wrong themselves, right? They didn't double register themselves. Some other person did it. There was no proof of intent or anything like that. This finding of fraud sticks with them. So last week we talked, because we had this, that could we litigate? So we had not seen any double registration RFEs until yesterday for companies that had filed on this cap. And this thing that they're double registering on is called commonalities, right? So they're saying these companies have these commonalities with each other, and they're looking at things like, well, there's so many cases that this company filed and so many cases your company filed, and we think you guys are connected because you're in the same building or you share the same lawyer or accountant or whatever it may be. Okay. And so what we did, and the reason we picked up cases at the end, is we said commonalities is not enough, right? There's nothing that says that. As a matter of fact, what we did, because we're law geeks, is we went through and saw that there was a final rule by USCIS on H-1Bs, and that there was notice and comment of those. And USCIS said it is fine for unrelated companies to file H-1Bs. As a matter of fact, little companies need to do it to catch up with the big companies, right? And in the H-1B world, there are really big companies like Infosys and Cognizant that gobble up a bunch of H-1Bs, right? And the little companies need to have a chance. So, people can, the vendor and the end user can both do it. And that's all good. That's what they said, right? They even said related companies could do it if they had a reasonable business purpose for doing it. Related companies, right? Commonalities are not related. Related companies are parent, subsidiary, or affiliates, not people that share the same account or even the same HR director for that reason. But that's what USCIS is doing. So I'm really looking forward to answer this RFE we got, and hopefully we can beat them on that. What I think we have coming, guys, is some more litigation, right? And I think USCIS is overstepping themselves again. So that's on my agenda. That's what I'm working on. That's what I'm excited about. Back to you, Pierre.
Excellent. Thanks, John. Jay, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this detailed information, John. We would like to ask this same question to Zoe, how her week went and if she faced something similar.
So I don't work with a whole bunch of H-1Bs, but I have been hearing about this from my colleagues. So I'm excited to see where it goes, just because it's been a bit of a hot topic, I think, lately. Really, in my practice, it's just been more O1s, a couple of potential EB1s, which is always really exciting. In terms of just legal news this week, USCIS updated the eligibility criteria for EB1s. So that's good specifically for people within STEM, just to get more guidance on what it is they're looking for, because it's already such a high standard to achieve. So I always like seeing more guidance just to be able to help clients with their cases. Something else I saw,
Can I jump in on that, Zoe? That's
sure.
fantastic and big, and this is what we want to do at Visas.AI. So USCIS puts new policy on what you do, how you meet the qualifications for an EB1, right? And so that's knowledge, that's clarity, right? And so what our platform does is takes you through the different criteria, right? And so, for example, EB1 is national or international awards, right? So, and memberships, major media, those sort of things. What USCIS has just done with no fanfare is said, here's what we think it is, right? So here's kind of how law works, and here's how we're trying to do it at Visas.ai. So at the bottom is a regulation, right? And it has plain language, and it says something like, national, international awards of excellence, something to that degree, right? So then USCIS interprets that, right? And they say, and here's what you to know, right? Is that, and not everybody knows this or even thinks about it, but this agency has politicians which change with the president, right? So when a new president comes in, they put new people in policy, right? And then they have bureaucrats, and these guys stay within these jobs forever, right? So the policy people come out, and policy people issue policy memorandum. So this means this is what the Biden administration says it wants its bureaucrats to do when they're adjudicating cases. All right. So if there was to be a new president, we might see new policy. You don't have to pass a new law to do new policy, right? And you can see that policy through a policy memorandum. You can even see it from some sort of presidential proclamation. We saw a lot of those under the Trump administration. That's how they legislated. They're like, we're going to legislate from the executive branch, and we're going to say, here's our policy on that. They were very, very big on that. They had whitehouse.gov. We were watching that all the time. Biden doesn't do that as much. He's doing it through policy memorandum, which usually uphold more. But what's really interesting, that and what we do in Visas.ai is we suggest these things, right? And so if there's new policy memorandum, you can stay up to speed on that and see that this happened. So what I saw in that policy memorandum that was really interesting is not what meets it, but more importantly, what doesn't meet it. right? That it does not include this was a whole new type of way of looking at what they think isn't good enough, which is what they're telling you is we're going to give you an RFE if you try to include this type of evidence when you're doing that. And so what our process does is helps the attorney go through and look at each of these criteria with this information so that you can make good decisions. Effectively, what we're trying to do is write a brief, not just a cover letter, up front that addresses these issues. And then hopefully that means you don't get an RFE, or if you do, it's a slight one, right? So thanks for bringing that up about memorandums and giving me an opportunity to talk about how important they are.
Sure.
One
Thank you
other
so much,
thing that I
John.
noticed too, just in terms of legal rulings, was there was just, I mean, as I'm sure we all know, there's been this tug of war with DACA.
Mm,
So 2 days ago, I mean, nothing has changed in terms of these DACA recipients right now, but it's still basically on a pause where no new applications are being accepted. So,
really?
in terms of new applications, yeah, it has been like this, but I think it was either yesterday or the day before. I think the 13th. I think there was a federal ruling on that. But all it really means, from my understanding of it,
Mm,
is that you still can't process any new DAC applications. You can still renew your application if it was being
right.
processed before, and you're still okay to travel with advanced parole. But it's just been this big back and forth, I think, because the Biden administration has been trying to,
So
again,
is that because of a court case that stopped it? Did they were they? I don't do enough DACA to know, but I try to keep up on stuff. But was the Biden administration trying to do DACA, and then was there a case in Texas that enjoined
that's what it
them?
was.
Is that what happened? Is that still what's going on? Does this administration want to do DACA, but it's precluded because of this court case or other court cases? Or do you know?
Yes, but I believe this one's being appealed.
Right.
So we're still in the midst of it, but this was just another decision that happened a few days ago. So just the
Oh,
update with what's going on.
so this was litigation. This was a court decision on DACA that continues to keep it in
Yes,
the status quo. Is it out of that same Texas case, or is there another case?
it is.
Okay.
It's Judge Hannon, I believe, in Texas.
Well, that's unfortunate and sad. That weird that we're picking on such a small number of people that have been here for such a long time and such an easy fix. And what it was funny, they're like, let's just help this really tiny spectrum of people that are here, kids that came over, right? And there's about 1 million of them, right? And so they've been in limbo this whole time. But it's political football, right?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
That's
Thank
great
you so
stuff.
much, John and Zoe. And I would like to ask the Gentian if he want to share something similar, if something happened to him in the last few weeks, or if he faced something similar in his practice.
Yeah, Jay, you're so muffled. I don't know if you heard it. Gentian, I think Jay was asking you to talk a little bit about your practice and
Uh,
maybe some issues or an issue that you're working on.
Uh, well, I just recently opened my office. I'm been in business
Congratulations.
for like a couple of months, but I'm an immigration lawyer for like 17 years.
Oh,
I
great.
do a lot of these
well,
visas actually. I do like EB1s, and I've
Okay.
done investor visas a lot, and all visas. I also do a lot of all visas. So the issues I encounter with these people, especially EB1s, are very confusing when like you can provide whatever they want, like in terms to the award with proof
Right.
and everything. They still insist this is not a national award, it's not an international,
Right.
and they ask the same things that I already provided them with.
Isn't
Um,
it crazy? Yeah, I think we do a lot of those, and we keep working on it, right? We keep trying to come up with new strategies. One of the things that we've used on EB1s, it's been successful. I had one denied where they had met 4 of the criteria, right? And I've seen them denied at 3 before,
yeah,
but
same here. Yeah,
only one other time had I seen 4 ever denied. Now, it wasn't from me, and it went to litigation. And it went to litigation in San Francisco, and that happened to be where my client is. So I really used it as a model. And so what we do in our technology is we write these briefs, right? And the brief, as opposed to a cover letter, is designed to be like a legal brief in litigation, right? And so what we're trying to do is set it up for litigation so it'll be a deterrent, right? So look where we're going to go if you deny us, right? So we don't want to go to litigation. We just
Yeah.
want you to prove the case. So one of the things that we argued that ended up being, I'll tell you why it was successful, is that we use experts instead of testimonials, right? And so they love to say that an expert letter is a witness statement, and it's not. The difference between a
Correct.
witness and an expert is that a witness saw the thing or knows the facts, whereas an expert is given information like the evidence and then uses their perspective to say, here's why this evidence meets the particular criteria or criterion, right? And so the key about it is not just using the expert, but there's a case that we use called Beastech, right? It's a Supreme Court case, and it says that the expert opinion by itself is evidence without even having any supporting evidence. So what we do is an expert with supporting evidence, just so it's a home run, bulletproof argument, right? And so when I had a denial in our case that we litigated on, they denied it in like one page, right? They're like insufficient, insufficient, insufficient. And what was really strange how they did it, right, is they said you met these 4 criteria, but you didn't meet the totality of the circumstances. And in this case, it was really interesting, Gentian, because what they did, what I think totality means is you look at all of it and you say, well, okay, you barely got here and on all of these ones, so we don't think they're. What they did is they created silos for each individual criteria again and made a higher level, right? Yeah. It's like level 1 here and then level 2. So I said, look, that's not a totality of the circumstances argument, but where I got them, where I think I got them, and I'll tell you why I think I got them there, is because they did not analyze what my expert said, right? And in this particular case, and I'll give facts, but not any individual facts. But this was an AI architect for a really big company that had done a really interesting thing by taking all the AI tools for this international company and making it one global tool that all of the different AI engineers used across tens of thousands of clients, and it was generating millions of dollars. So we had actually evidence behind that. But more importantly, the expert took this tool and then said, here's the leading tools that are similar to it, and here's how it's different, right? Now, we all know that the USCIS doesn't have an opposing expert, right? They don't have somebody else that says, I disagree with your expert, exactly. Like if we were litigating a car wreck case, right? And we're saying the automobile was defective, and they brought in an expert and they said it wasn't the automobile that was defective, the driver was drunk or whatever, right? So they don't have an opposing expert, and they didn't analyze my expert. They just said, we find it insufficient. So when I sued under the APA as it being arbitrary and capricious, I said it was arbitrary and capricious because they didn't even analyze it, right? So what they did with us is they did a motion to reopen. They said, would you agree to a motion to reopen that we may do one of these 3 things, right? Which was approve it, deny it, or I don't know, whatever they said they were going to do. So they reopened it, but then they said, we intend to deny it. And I was like, how do you intend to deny something you've already denied? But they waited to the whole time. And then they said, would you agree to an extension? I'm like, well, there's a no, I won't do any good. So then they just approved it, right? So that's why I said, I think I got them, right? Because I don't know. But we pinned them, right? We pinned them with an expert opinion and a case law that said that the expert opinion is evidence, and that because they didn't analyze the evidence, we couldn't get them there. So I love to talk to people about OBONs and EB1s, and we love to share different things because we learn things every day too. So reason I'm throwing out that anecdote is, do you have any anecdotes, any tricks of the trade that you'd like to share on how you address when they're just so arbitrary in their decision making around these types of visas?
Well, what I do, so what do you do if they deny? You file an appeal or a motion to reopen, correct, or reconsider?
In this case, I just decided to sue them, and it's funny.
So
I don't do it very often.
Can you go straight to federal court without exhausting all the appeals and everything?
100%. Yeah, it's really interesting. You'd have no obligation to do the motion to reopen if you don't want to. And so I did it. And what I did is I essentially copied the case that had been successful that I researched, right? They had another one, similar facts. And in that one, which was really interesting, they reopened it and denied it a second time. And the court really punished them because they tried to fix it, right? But they didn't with ours, probably because they tried it and it didn't work for them when they did it last time. They just reopened and then tried to reopen again, and then when we disagreed, they approved it. But so what my point of this is the way we're doing it initially by writing briefs, by using memos that Zoe just said, is that we want to give evidence and law behind it, because what immigration wants us to do is argue facts, right? If we argue facts, it's he said, she said. If we argue law, then they're bound by these obligations. And that's why we throw the BSTEC case in. You can't just decide that you may or may not want to interpret this expert. And you can't just call an expert a witness, right? Because they're not just a witness. They're an expert witness. And they have knowledge that we don't have and you don't have, right? So that's kind of how we went about it.
Very
All
impressive.
right, thank you so much, John. And looks like we have Yesh with us. How Yesh, how you doing? So we would like to have her opinion on it, if she faced something similar and how her practice is going on this week.
My practice mainly revolves right now around H-1Bs. So, as John said earlier, we saw that double registration. And so that's basically where my life is revolving around right now, currently. And so, yeah, just to add to it, I think there are so many people that step back from filing this season just because, and I'm so sorry if you hear me talk, just this season because of the fear that other attorneys perpetuated, or the fear that just starts from rumors. You know, there's no base to where these rumors are coming in from in the first season, but we saw them just travel, like spread like wildfire, and so many people backed away even when they had a genuine case. A lot of my friends that are in, you know, they are of the Indian community, and they come over for IT purposes, or they come in on H-1Bs, and they've reached out to me with genuine cases, and they just back out, saying, you know, I don't feel comfortable. I don't want to get in trouble with immigration. I don't want to be deported in the future or something. I'm like, there's nothing that you're doing wrong, but it's just they hear rumor and it just spreads and it just adds and just builds up. So it was
It's
unfortunate,
always
but
the most law-abiding people, right, who are
yeah,
afraid. I notice always, you know.
always, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's where my practice is right now.
So
That's
yes,
where
what kind of RFEs besides double registration are you seeing?
There's the simple ones, or the somebody is working in a specialty occupation. They have their bachelor's in the same kind of degree, they have a master's in the same degree, they're working in that field, and USCIS says prove that they're eligible or they qualify for this. And you're like, what more proof do you need? It says bachelor's in architecture, master's in interior design, and he's working as an interior design, and you're like, what more do I have to qualify this? That's where we bring in our experts, and they have to systematically go through and say this person qualifies for this as a specialty occupation because of so and so, A, B, and C. But it's just sometimes you're just thinking, are they just buying time? Like, you know, they're just overworked, or they have too many cases and they're just throwing random RFPs out so they can get more time.
I think they definitely do that. I think officers definitely do that.
They get bonuses based on how many RFPs they got, right?
I mean, not for H-1Bs because I don't work with a whole lot of those, but I've had RFPs for things where they're asking me, an officer has asked me for something I've already provided, like a tax return, and it's like, it's in there. I submitted that.
Well, once they asked me for a singer EB1 case, prove that he invented, and they wanted to see the patents that he registered and all of this.
Singing, right?
A singer.
Oh my goodness.
So definitely it's a tactic to buy more time. It was a premium processing case, so
right.
It's insane.
Because they're required by
So looks
law
like we
to.
will be having a lot of H-1B applicants watching this stream. So any news on second round this year?
Yeah, we got a second round, right? So 77,000 out of 85,000 were reopened, which is a massive number, right? And we're seeing of those picked up in the second round, the companies that we represent, close to 200 kind of staffing companies, right? And we're seeing them want to do about 40% of them. So we may see round three, right? And 2 years ago when we had multiple rounds, you had one, in April, then you had one in June or July, I can't remember, and then you had one in October, right? So we may see another one in October or November, which I guess is good for attorneys. We'll get to do it, but I parrot Yesh's situation where I don't know why they're so afraid. Especially if it's their business model, they're not doing their job by hiring people to do these things in a place where we have so much underemployment and we really need more people in the tech sector. Canada's just taken them, right? Canada invented a whole new visa for our H-1Bs. It's the come on up visa, right? And you just go to Canada and work. I think we're short sighted. I think we're a little arrogant that it's funny. It's not sustainable to be the top tech country in the world, especially if you have to import all the talent to be there and then don't allow the easy importing of that talent, right? They're making it hard on American companies to keep the jobs in America, and they don't look at it like that, right? They don't look at it factually, they don't look at it statistically, they look at it anecdotally. And what I mean by that is they'll find an instance of fraud and say, here's where somebody committed fraud, and then expose everybody to that. Or they'll find an instance where, a long term employee has to train his American, by the way, long term American employee has to train their foreign national, assistant to take over their job and get paid less, right? And then they take that and they run with it as if that is the norm or statistically relevant, which it isn't. And they miss the point that for every H-1B that's hired, 7 additional people get hired, right? If you think about it, that's the deal. And when H-1Bs go like in bulk to India, which they do, all the Americans that were holding the 6-figure jobs above them lose those jobs, right? So it's crazy. But what we're seeing now, in my opinion, is that was the trend to say that these folks are undercutting us, and now they're coming in and saying these folks are committing fraud, and it sickens me, and we got to fight against it. So, uh,
All right. Thank you, John.
yeah, Jay.
And I would like to ask this to all of you, and we'll start with Gentian. How we can make this H-1B visa process smooth? Any suggestions? How we can make this process?
Well, I don't do H1Bs at all, so I was about to ask, which I'll be more than happy to refer these cases if I get one to any one of you, whoever does
Yeah,
H1B.
anyone who want to share any suggestions on this process
How
so
to
we can
fix the
make it.
H-1B system? Get rid of the caps.
I was gonna.
Right? Let the market drive it, right? I mean, how many jobs do we need in America? How many employers want to have workers, and then make them go through that criteria where they have to meet the requirements, they got to pay them the right amount of money. I think the answer is simple. I don't think they'll do it, but I think that's the answer. Is that it's funny how the lobbyists go and argue this. They ask for crumbs, right? Like let's raise it X amount more. Why is there even a number there? It's completely arbitrary. It's not based on anything, right? And it wasn't always the number it is now. They've lowered it and they didn't raise it back up, and it doesn't fluctuate based on anything. It is a mere governmental concept of let's just put this number here and make sure people hit it. Ironically, it's only 1% of the entire economy, but a really really important 1% to do it, because it's not for any one industry. It's for every professional industry. Everybody here, if we were from a foreign country, would have to have an H-1B in every job here. We got Pierre and you and Jay. You're not attorneys, but you're professionals, right? If you have a job that requires a university degree, you have to get an H-1B. So the techies that are taking 70% of them are sharing that with every doctor, every lawyer, every middle management guy, every financial planner, every architect. It's every profession. We're only going to
Yeah,
allow in, 65,000 plus an additional 20,000 that got their advanced degree in America, right? It's
absolutely.
the answer, I think, Jay, and I'm glad you raised it, and I think it's something that we can talk about on this program is our political solutions. But the political solution that should be out there is that we need more people. Our economy across many industries is dying for people. There's a couple things that went into that, right? I mean, COVID took a lot of people out of the workforce. People are working from home now. That's shaking up the workforce. We have the baby boomers aging out and not being replaced by smaller generations. Um, we had a bunch of deportation, right? A bunch of deportation took people out of our economy and scared other people to come. That the very aggressive anti-immigration policies we had by the previous administration made less people want to come to college here. So it not
Yeah.
only took them out of the workforce, it took out that industry, which we lead the world. If you look at the world rankings by U.S. News and World Report on universities, the top 10 universities in the world, 8 of them are in the United States. Only Oxford and Cambridge are in that, and they're like 6 and 7. And so we have really taken a baseball bat to the head of our university system by scaring off people to come to our school because they can't enter into our workforce, right? It's crazy. So there's unintended circumstances, Jay, about what's happening by putting these restrictive numbers and
Mhm.
restrictive policies on allowing
Yeah.
American companies to hire who they need to stay atop of their profession.
Well, thank you, John. I would like to ask Yesh if she has some suggestion on this.
I think it was that getting rid of the caps might be the best
Yash, can
way
you
to.
hear us? Oh, I
Yeah,
think Yash is.
Ye-
I can hear you.
I can
Oh,
hear you.
Yes, I can
sorry.
hear you. Go.
No,
You.
you're good.
Um,
No, I'm asking if Yash heard the question.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. I was gonna say, I was about to say the same thing as John. Is getting rid of the caps might be the best thing to do because for me, it never made sense how we came to that number when the market needs more people than we have caps for. It's also forcing people away from coming in and studying here and settling here, and as well as forcing people to getting degrees after degrees just because they can't get an H1B. They go back and get a second degree or a third degree or PhD, and you're just like, why? It's not it's not a good long-term plan, if I can say that. That it just makes no sense to me that we're having 60,000 or 85,000 in total for caps when there's so many more jobs that people need. And when these jobs aren't getting filled here, they're just companies are looking elsewhere. They're sending them out, so it's hurting us in the long run as a leading country. But that's my 2 cents in that.
That's fantastic. Hey, Jay, can I ask? I want to ask a question of Gentian. Gentian, you said you're working on investor visas as well.
Yeah.
EB5s, E2s. What are you seeing
E2s
in those
mostly.
spaces?
Yeah, I never done EB5, just E2s.
E2s. Okay. Well, tell us about the E2 and what are some of the types of things you're working on? What are some of the your approaches?
Well,
What are some of
E2s
your
are
issues?
like they're fair because usually the embassy deals with this. I do these E2s out of the country, so the U.S. embassy, and each one of them has specific requirements, different requirements. So I
Right.
usually check their website in each
Mm-hmm.
country, so I
Mm-hmm.
comply with whatever they want. Uh,
Yeah.
they're not they're not so bad actually. London, the U.S. embassy in London, they are more strict.
Mm-hmm.
They drive you crazy with all sorts of nonsense, but the rest is like pretty straightforward. If you follow their instructions, and my advice is that you have to show a lot of expenses, not just put the money in the bank here and provide a nice and beautiful business plan. It's not gonna work. I've tried. People don't want to spend money unless they know they're gonna get a visa, but that's not gonna
Right.
work. So even
That's
small
so
expenses
classic.
matter. Like everything has to come out of the bank account from the company's bank account, and it works. It works. It's a good visa. Once they come here, then we try to that they find a company to sponsor the spouse, not the principal investor. So we
Mm-hmm.
go through the perm process, and the whole family will get green cards. It's time
Yeah.
consuming, but it's a good way to bring the family here, work, make money, and meanwhile get eventually get a green card.
Very cool, Gentian. Thank you for that. Do you work with any particular country or region, or do you get your clients from all over the place?
But mostly I work with like Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Italy a
Okay.
lot, and
Right.
some cases from England.
Yeah. Very good. Do you find that that there's a specific number or a safe number for the amount of money that they need to invest to get an E2?
It all gonna depend on the business. For example, in New York, a lot of them they just buy restaurants or coffee shops or things like this.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, honestly, if you buy a restaurant in the city, I would say to be safe, you're gonna need at least minimum 150 to 200.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I always tell them to put more in the bank. It's not necessary that you spend all of that. You can put
Right.
300,000 and spend 100. It's still gonna work. Um,
Interesting.
and so it depends on the business. I have like some clients in Queens that they bought pizzerias there. Like, it doesn't cost more than 50,000. So you can get an investor visa with that kind of money, even if you put 50, 60. So
Yeah.
it's not a
So
set
that's what I was going
amount.
to
It has
ask,
to
right?
be
Because
connected to the business.
we've always heard, that 100,000 is what the consulates respect, and at USCIS would go to 50, right? And so I think I have share the same strategy you do. If you go USCIS first, if you're ever going to leave the country, you're going to have to consular process.
Correct.
And consular processing E2 is different than like an H1B. It's not a mere stamping, it's a full adjudication. So you're going to have to pay me again to redo it in a different way. So let's just go to the consulate first.
That's what I do.
Um,
That's what, yeah,
is
I
that what
agree.
you do? Yeah, and how much do you believe or have seen that 100,000 seems to be the magic number? And have you had successes at the consulate with less than
Yes.
100, or is that just a USCIS thing?
No, I got in consulate for $60,000. The client bought a beauty salon. She was a hairdresser. So she got it. But
Mm,
I agree with you. I usually tell them it's minimum 100
right.
to be like just to be serious and
Be
include
safe,
everything.
right? Yeah, we try to eliminate risk, and look, you're right. I mean, it is a completely discretionary decision, and they're going to
Yeah,
make it really quickly,
yeah,
and then you're going
correct.
to be standing there going, whatever. I've got a great story on everything that I suggested they didn't do, which I love to tell to my clients when they're trying to talk me out of these requirements, as if they know. But I had a guy. He's an Australian. His father was a multimillionaire, right? And I think dad was using a little bit of tough love, wanting him to make it on his own. And so, I told him you should invest 100,000. He was gonna be a business coach, right? He was gonna do it in Las Vegas. Didn't rent his own space. Went in with another company. I get okay, at least get a lease. Instead of the 100,000, he invested 50 into his personal account, and he started spending it on personal things like his personal rent,
Yeah,
a car payment, clothing, groceries.
they're not gonna
And then
care.
he goes into the consulate and they're like, dude, what are you doing? And then they call me up, dad and son, and they were frantic and like, well, they turned us down. I'm like, okay, look, invest 100,000, wire it into the corporate account right
Yeah,
now. Set up the corporate account separate than the personal one. And I'm not going to tell you I told you so,
yeah,
but let's see if you can go back in. And they went back in, and it was successful. So the pro and con of the consulate is the con is it's a punch to the face if they tell you no, and it's really really harsh, right? But you can go back in sometimes, and many times you can contact the council if they turn your client down and ask them what the thing is and communicate with them, which you can never do with USCIS, right?
correct.
There is no person. It's the black hole and hoping it comes back. So that's fascinating. Really love it. You're doing E2s, one of my favorite types of
Yeah,
visas.
I like them too.
Yeah,
All
good
right,
man.
thank you everyone for the detailed discussion today. And I would like to ask John if AI can help the H1B visa or process or similar process, how AI can help you. Like AI is getting advanced, and how
Yeah.
Visa.ai and other AI features can help this process.
Thanks, Jay. Well, we're releasing and we're taking calibration partners now for an AI based tool that uses AI three ways. And so I love to talk about this with techies. I love to talk about it with lawyers. So what we were about to release in November of last year when ChatGPT dropped, right? And ChatGPT changed everything for everybody, right? It's essentially Google. Instead of searching, it's suggesting, right? And it writes for you. It's generative AI to generate content, right? So immediately everybody loved it, and techies thought, okay, we'll do this. And I don't know if they care, but basically their effect was to replace lawyers with this AI tool, right? And what it was like, it's like answer my RFE. So when we stopped, we put on the brakes, and thanks for bringing this up. We're using AI in 3 ways. First, right? So in this tool that you have here, this is what we will be releasing in the next month or so, and we're signing people up to try it. So you upload an RFE. The first time it uses AI is where it can identify an issue. What I mean by that is it can tell by tokens and being trained enough what the difference is between the issue and other language, right? You don't have to pick it out yourself. And what it does, you can kind of see it there on the left, the red, yellow, and green. Those are the different issues, right? So what we've done is we don't want it just to do it for us, right? It's like, I use the analogy is AI is like taking a brand new law student and throwing them into the law library and have them do your work for you. It will come back. You'll have something. It's just usually not very good. So what we use AI for is identify the issue. But if you're wrong, we need to be able to do something about it, right? So if it says the issue is here, we can expand it or retract that issue. We can even paraphrase it. If we don't want to answer RFEs the way they say it, and we want to say that they're summarizing it that way, we want to have that control as a lawyer. We also want to answer the issue we want to ask first. As a litigator, what I would always do is always litigate our answer first. Like if you're doing a motion for summary judgment or a motion to dismiss, answer your best argument first. Don't answer them the way they structure it, right? So you can design that. So that's why we put those issues on the left. You can move them around if you want. The second thing is we inserted the lawyer back in the process. We're not going to say, okay, AI, answer my RFE, right? Because here's the thing about ChatGPT, it's everything, right? It's everything in the world, and that's too much, right? Because it doesn't know what to get, and it doesn't know how to distinguish between what's good enough or what's not good enough well enough, honestly, in my opinion. So what if you ask a different question to ChatGPT, you get a different answer, right? So it really puts it on the user to know what question to ask and refine it and stuff like that. And that ends up sometimes being more work than just doing it the old-fashioned way. So what we have here, identify the issues. We take that issue, and then what we've put in front of the generative AI is suggestive AI, right? So we've taken what we have in Visas.AI right now, which is manual. Here are the regs, here are the memorandum, here's AAO decisions or Balkan decisions, and here's case law. And we suggest them, right? So you can see it right there, what AAO decisions are connected to this issue, right? So we're sending it out, and the artificial intelligence is sending it back, right? So we're not searching ourselves. So what we've done is we've flipped the way attorneys do it, but we've kept them in the process, right? So what a good attorney does, someone like Gentian who's done this 17 years, he's seen these issues before. It's not his first rodeo, right? He knows on an E2, that conversation we had back and forth about the amount of investment you need on an E2 is based on years of trial and error, right? AI can't replace us on that, and they shouldn't, right? You have AI and you have lawyers. Together, we're really good. Separately, sometimes the lawyer is going to be better, sometimes the AI is going to be better, but let's combine it, right? So what we're doing is like, okay, AI, be the law student, go and find me the memos that go to this issue. Find me the AAO decisions, find me that. I propose that all lawyers would be better if you immediately give them all the different decisions that they can make that decision from. We don't have enough time sometimes to go look. We forget to ask the right question. So this is just a tool for us, not a replacement of us. We've left the lawyer in it, and we've done it in a way that a lawyer thinks about it, right? A lawyer is going to go through this. So if they get an RFE, and this is called the RFE responder, the first thing that USCIS is going to do is say, here's how we interpret this regulation, and we think your facts aren't sufficient. So the first thing you want to do is, do I have additional facts, right? Okay, I got some additional facts. Secondly, did they miss my first facts? And I think, Jensen, you'll probably laugh about this. How many times have they on these, especially these premium processing EB1s, do they say you never gave anything and you gave it to them, right? This is missing this and this and this, and it was in there, right?
Almost like 50% of the
almost
time.
every time, right?
And I'm confused.
Right.
It's the same thing they ask, and I already gave it to them.
They already gave it to him. So in our process here, here's my new facts, and here's my old facts that you did, or the facts in the original petition you didn't do. Now, what we often do when they just kick it back, we don't have any new facts, right? We've given you everything. And I know there are lawyers that hold stuff back. I don't believe in that
But they will
because
say, because it happened to me, they will say you never responded to the RFE. You never responded to this point. You never responded to this point because I
right,
told them I already gave it to you. It's Exhibit A or B, whatever, and they deny
exactly.
saying the RFE you never responded to point. I don't know, number one or number two or whatever. It's insane.
You're 100% right. So one of the things that we do and we're doing with this technology is instead of just telling them they didn't see it, right? What the trick that we like to use is let's have an expert, even if we use that expert before, let's have the expert say, I understand that you think the evidence is insufficient. Let me clarify this for you. I call it drilling down. So have the expert come back, look at that evidence they didn't see before. Don't tell them they didn't see it, but say, hey, here's how this evidence meets it. That way you're not fighting them, you're educating them, right? And the difference is these are human beings making this decision, and sometimes these human beings are grumpy. And you just don't, they're the judge and the jury, right? And you would never argue with a judge the way you would argue with your opposing counsel. But in this, they are both the opposing counsel
And
and the
uh,
judge, which is the tricky part. So how do we give them the deference we give a judge while they're trying to turn us down? Well, that's where we bring in somebody else. That's the expert. So we then have the expert evaluate the new evidence and the old evidence to the particular issue, right? Then after that, what our technology will allow you to do is go through that tree of different authority, right? And so here's what I think immigration likes to do. Immigration likes to take the issue and phrase it any way they want. They may leave off half the clause. Now, if you say a membership in an organization and you leave off that requires outstanding achievement by experts, right? They'll hit you if you don't have an expert that's evaluated or if it doesn't say outstanding achievement. But they do it all the time themselves. They will paraphrase their own regulations. So the first thing we do, what's the regulation and what's the plain language of that regulation? So if the plain language says A, B, and C, and we've hit A, B, and C, you tell them that, right? The next thing you go to is how does their memorandum apply that regulation? How are their policy people telling their bureaucrats? That's why I said that earlier. Policy people are different than bureaucrats. They have different agendas, they have different purposes, and there are a whole lot less of them, right? And they've been there a lot shorter time period. So what we can tell by these humans is these bureaucrats oftentimes disagree with the policies of the new president that's come in. Some of them may have been there for 3 or 4 presidents, right? One of them might be a really hardcore conservative. The other might be a very, liberal person. And if the president's different, they don't always follow them. If they don't, our job as lawyers is to say that they didn't. Your policy memorandum says you have to look at it this way, and you're not following your own policy, right? Which helps us. Then AAO decisions. Now, AAO decisions come in 3 different varieties. Most of them are non-precedential, meaning they don't have to follow them. And the rough thing in immigration is I had twin brothers that were rugby players that played on the same teams. One got approved and one got denied. They had the exact same facts. They were brothers. They were twins, right? So they don't have to follow their own thing. Now, I did a motion reopen and both of them got on and the life was good. But it was really funny in the saddest possible way of that word that they could actually distinguish between 2 people that could not be more similarly situated. Same employer, same job, same background, literally born same day, same time within seconds, right? So they do this. You could have 7 straight approvals for a company on one type of deal and the next one goes, and it's not precedent setting. However, what AAO decisions are precedential, not precedential, they're persuasive, right? Persuasive means, hey, USCIS got knocked down last time it tried this. What I love on Extraordinary Ability, Gentian, is when they say that this guy won this award as a team, right? There's 2 really good AAO decisions. I have 3 actually. One is a Nobel Prize winner that shared the Nobel Prize that USCIS tried to deny. And they're like, come on. They split the money, but he's still a Nobel Prize winner. The other was an Olympic relay racer. And they said, look, this guy wasn't on the sideline. He wasn't on the team that won the gold medal. He was one of the participants. And all 4 of them got gold medals. They didn't have one gold medal goes to one guy. So those were 2 issues where USCIS was negated by their own agency adjudicatory board. And even though those were not precedent setting cases, we did it. Now, sometimes USCIS will adopt a case and say it's precedent. And it happened to us once, and I didn't know it until last ALA when there was somebody talking about the P1 visa and said in the matter of VLF. And I'm like, VLF? I never heard of this case. And it was Veely Law Firm. I'm like, oh my God. I remember when it happened, but what they did is they took the denial for a tennis player. What we were doing is saying tennis players and at clubs, at tennis clubs, could work while they were playing tennis. And USCIS made this sort of over a period of time where they thought it had to be exclusively playing. It couldn't also be coaching. And we tried to say it's not just coaching, it's ancillary, it's endorsement. And we kept trying new things, and they would approve it for a while till they just didn't. Well, I didn't know it, but they took one of the denials and then put it up to AAO and then published it, right? They did that. And so those are more binding on them, right? Unfortunately, that didn't help us. I think we could still litigate against that, but I'll hold that for another day. And then above AAO decisions is case law, federal case law. And federal case law comes in three varieties too: district court decisions, which would not be binding on other districts; appellate court decisions, which would not be binding on other circuits, right? That's how you have circuit splits and what some goes to the Supreme Court; and Supreme Court decisions, which are binding on everybody, right? And that's why, Gentian, we talked about using the Supreme Court case that says that the evidence is there, because they can't get away from it, right? They can't say that's the Ninth Circuit and we're in the Second Circuit or whatever. So that all of that stuff is authority, and what our technology does, Jay, is suggest that. That's artificial intelligence, suggestive AI, right? Then once we have the suggested AI and the attorneys play with it a little bit, at that point is when we go in for the generative AI. And that's why our decision can be better. And here's the other thing that a lot of people don't know about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is pulling from a database that's a couple of years old. I think 2019, 2020, right? So if a case comes down yesterday, it doesn't know it. And more importantly, we've seen people get burned in federal court cases right now because their cases got overturned, right? So ChatGPT thinks it's pulling the latest case, or it's just telling you a case. It doesn't know what it's doing. But people are relying on it. So by adding us back into it, we're not replacing the attorneys. We're making the attorneys smarter and faster. And that's how
Well,
we're using AI. Um,
perfect.
yep.
Thank you so much, John. And
Sure.
I think we are almost at the finish line, but we will give some time for this recording to be uploaded. And in your city or state, and they want some help from you guys, so they can reach out to you directly. So we'll be sending you an email after this meeting, and you can send us those details if you want to publish that.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jay.
One question, like if we were to sign up for the service, how much, like